Well, I'm here with Adam from Churchfront, and we just wanted to have a quick discussion on what it looks like to prepare for great sound. So virtual sound checks are definitely a way that we can, as sound guys, get prepared for the team. We can iron out those fine details before they get there so they're not sitting on the stage waiting for us to dial in their EQ or, whatever it is. But for some of the people listening right now, they may be like, well, what is a virtual sound check exactly? So will you go ahead and explain that?
Yeah. A virtual sound check is exactly what it sounds like. It's doing a sound check virtually with pre-recorded tracks. So generally the way you would do this is you would set up your soundboard with a computer, and you'd have to be able to get multi-track audio from your soundboard to your computer. So if you have the X32, it has the USB port that can do 32 in, 32 out. That's just native. That's what comes with the board when you buy it. A lot of people will get a Dante I/O card, and then you could even do more with your networked audio, but either one of those works, and then you just need a computer with a DAW on it. You can get, we recommend Ableton at Churchfront, but you can get Reaper for $60. There's Tracks Live from Waves, which is not supported anymore, but it's available still for download. And that's free. So it doesn't take much to get started with this. And with the X32 and most boards, there is a button where you can just press flip the input, where you're choosing the set of inputs from A and B. So it's like you can choose your stage inputs, hit a button, and then you're ready to go with pulling in channels from a DAW. So it doesn't take a whole lot to make this happen, but I think the benefits are worth the effort to go through this. So what you'd do is you'd play back audio that you recorded from a service, individual channels, kick drum, vocals, guitars, all these have their own channel that gets recorded to a DAW. And then you play it back through your soundboard, and you're not like asking the drummer. I've done this at festivals. Hey, can I get that kick drum? And then you have them do that, and you work on the kick drum for 10 minutes, and halfway through someone's like, hey, do you want a coffee? And you're like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, the drummer's just on stage kicking the drum for 10 minutes, and you're wasting their time with that. So this is kind of a way where you don't need a band on stage to practice mixing. So you'd pull in all of your channels to your board, and you'd be able to actually hear what it sounds like through the actual soundboard's EQ, through its compression, through all the mix bus that you're doing into your speakers in the room. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Is there like a best time to record these tracks? Because you got rehearsal, you got the service. Like, when's the best time to grab those tracks to use for a virtual sound check?
Definitely a Sunday or a service, whenever your services are. For a few different reasons. One is if you have audience or crowd mics, you're not going to get anything from those during rehearsal, except for the sound of an empty room. Another is, like, people don't play to their full extent usually during a rehearsal the way that they would in a service. Like, it's just a different experience, worshiping with a group of people rather than like going through the songs to prepare for that. So people will sing louder, they'll play differently. And then also what you're trying to do with your virtual sound check is be prepared for a service. So it's kind of the closest thing that you can get to having people in the room. Like, there's no other time to practice the same thing other than during a service.
Awesome. So what's the best use of a virtual sound check? So like, you have all your tracks, they're loaded in, and you're by yourself now. You're sitting there with the mixer, and you're going to play it through and fine tune some things. Like, what do you find yourself working on the most?
Usually dialing in vocals, sometimes dialing in, a guitar, or getting the mix bus compression set properly, but generally not drums unless you have a some you can get there a little bit, but if you have an acoustic drum set, then you're not having the sound of the drums in the room when you practice. And so that is one of the kind of, not really pitfalls, but just one of the things that you don't get out of a virtual sound check. You can't know what it's like or what it's going to sound like when someone's actually hitting the drum in the room. Because it's more sound reinforcement at that point, right? You're adding to the sound that's in the room. But if someone's playing through an amp modeler with their guitar, or someone's playing a bass guitar through a Sans amp, you're going to get a pretty realistic sound. Like, it'll sound the same as when you virtually sound checked versus Sunday.
This video is brought to you by X32 Mastery, the fastest way to master both the X32 and the M32. Get access today for you and your team at x32.church.
So for somebody that does like a virtual sound check for the first time, like that's probably the thing that they're going to notice. They're going to play those tracks through and be like, well, this sounds nothing like what it sounded whenever I recorded these tracks. And like you said, it's because that natural sound from the drums and even from the vocals and just what's going on in the room when all those live instruments are on the stage, all that's missing now. So it's not going to sound the same. And you can't get like the perfect mix from your virtual sound check, but like you said, you can dial in those fine tuning things. Like, where do you dial in on a vocal, like the EQ and the compressor and everything like that? It gives you time to fine tune those things.
And even train your ear. Like, I want to listen. I want to figure out how to set a high pass filter on a vocal. Like, where does it need to be in a full band context? If you're soloing the vocal, you're going to be like, I need it way down here at like 200, 120. Like, I want to get that body out of the vocal, but it doesn't really add to the mix once the rest of the band is in. So being able to even practice mixing from a virtual sound check, and that's, I think, one of the main benefits. So if I was a worship pastor, if I was the main audio director at a church and I wanted to train someone to do sound, it's pretty difficult to do during a service because, you have to set a certain standard of excellence, and you can't say, hey, let's solo this during the service and mute all the other channels so you can hear what the vocal sounds like coming through. You're not going to do that on a Sunday, but you could do that on a Thursday morning or a, Friday evening, like, when no one else is in the room. You can experiment with a virtual sound check and show people different things.
That's my favorite thing about virtual sound check. It kind of takes the pressure off, right? Because when you're there in rehearsal or even during the service, like, you don't have the freedom to try things or to check out to see if you have this certain skill or whatever, because that's embarrassing if you get it wrong and you make a mic feedback or whatever. But when it's just you in the mixer and you're playing back those tracks, you can just try anything you want to. You can take what you learned from Churchfront and try it out. You can take what you learned from Collaborate Worship, try it out. I mean, that's the beauty of a virtual sound check, isn't it?
Yeah. And especially with training. And I think that's where most people are at. Like, it's not common to have a dedicated audio engineer at your church. It's, mostly people that are volunteering their time and they don't do this day in and day out. So having the ability to practice the same way that, say, a vocalist or a guitarist does in their home this is kind of that opportunity to practice and get better at your craft.
Yep. Agreed. So how often do you think we should be using virtual sound checks? Is this something that you do like weekly or monthly or just kind of as needed? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, well, we're pretty dialed in at the church that I serve at because we've had done virtual sound checks. Like, there was a season where we'd do it, 3 times a week for a couple hours, just so we can get everything rolling as quick as possible. But there were other times where another church I served at, we would do a rehearsal and then we would hit the flip A/B switch and play back, 15 seconds after rehearsal ended, and we could listen through, not only for the sound engineer to show me as the worship pastor what they were doing and, what they liked and, bring up different things that we maybe would want to change before the service, but the musicians could hear like, oh, what did it sound like, not in my in-ear mix, what did it sound like through the house? And then they can realize, maybe I should play dynamically different during this section, or, we really got to lock this in. So, right after rehearsal is a pretty cool time too. Another benefit of them is being able to save presets. And if you're in the situation where you're the tech director or the worship pastor, and you can pull up a virtual sound check, say you had Susie singing, she was leading that week on a certain microphone, and you're like, I really like this sound in this tone. It's probably going to work within whatever band context there is. Like, it doesn't matter who the drummer is or who the guitarist is. That preset is going to work for Susie and her vocal. So saving that, and then every time that she leads, just pulling that up before rehearsal, you're going to have a way better starting point. And you can focus on the whole mix, like her vocal within the context or other instruments that you don't have presets for. So I think that that's just also one of the best ways to use a virtual sound check and the benefits from it.
That's awesome, man. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk through this with me. For those who are watching, maybe they've never heard of Churchfront before, or maybe they've never seen you before, just tell them a little bit about like what you guys have going on at Churchfront and how they can stay connected with you.
Yeah, so we do training. We record courses that you can watch online, and then we also do coaching. Generally, I'm the coach for most of the calls. So if you're really struggling with, hey, I watch the videos, I looked up things online, I don't know how this is going, or I'm stuck at this point, you can hop on a Zoom call and we can chat through different things. So that's mostly my role there, is like the instructor and the coach. And we do a lot with audio, but it's not our main focus. We also teach live streaming setups, going through ProPresenter and presenting and cameras, and basically the whole AVL and worship leading experience we kind of provide training for.